Outstanding, the ultimate accolade for teachers. We challenge secondary English teacher David Polycut to go from good to outstanding. A top inspector will observe one lesson. 2 experts will fine-tune his practice and beef up his presentation. He then gets 2 weeks to take on the advice before the inspector comes back for the final verdict.
I think that you should always remember what your strengths are as a teacher and play to them. And I think today possibly I forgot that.
Sydney Russell School is a large mixed comprehensive in Dagenham, East London. David Polycut is an English teacher in his 3rd year of teaching.
I have got a passion for literature, and I do like to see students' reaction for the first time when they come across something new and the penny drops and they realise there's more out there than what they previously thought.
The English department rates his teaching as good.
8FS. They're hard-working, they're fun.
Yeah, I must say, darling, I couldn't possibly lend you any more than £5,000.
Yeah, I must say, darling, I couldn't possibly lend you any more than £5,000.
I enjoy his lessons because he makes them fun. He likes taking the mickey out of people sometimes, which is very funny.
A bit more like a Victorian gentleman.
David will focus the challenge on his Year 8s.
His personality in the classroom is definitely a strength. His subject knowledge is really strong. I think he does need to think about how he gets all students involved in the lesson.
I'd like to bring more things like active techniques and bona fide discussion to the class. I think, like lots of teachers, I tend to speak too much.
So you need to have someone speaking in the next sentence you write. It could be
Well, he does explain quite a lot to you, and if you don't understand, he will go over it and over it again.
If you don't understand, he's not the kind of person that you'd be afraid to ask.
As trite as it sounds, I think you have to want them to do well. It's not actually about you as a teacher, it's more about them. Obviously, I like to think that I've got the potential to become outstanding, and hopefully this process will get me somewhere closer to that nirvana.
It's the morning of David's observation. With hundreds of inspections under her belt, School Inspector Claire Gillies leads inspection teams up and down the country. She certainly knows an outstanding lesson when she sees one.
I'm at Sydney Russell School to watch David Polycut with his Year 8 English class. This is a higher ability group.
David has 60 minutes to impress our inspector, continuing their unit on great expectations.
Right, what you have in front of you should have a number on it and it says I can at the start. What I'd like you to do, first of all, just for 2 minutes, is to read through these success criteria, and actually write a number down next to each one, what you think you are good at doing, what you are not so good at doing.
The thrust is much more now on making a judgment about the learning in the sort of pupil's eyes and sensing, are they learning enough, are they moving forward, and are they genuinely interested?
The last lesson that we had, we were looking at this character. Now, you are going to be putting yourself in the position of Miss Havisham. You are going to be portraying Miss Havisham yourselves. Just to give you a little idea then, this is the sort of thing that I would do. No! I hate you. I hate you as well, I'm jealous of you. You know why? You're going to find someone you love, aren't you?
He's funny, just the things he comes out with. He's just so random sometimes. But it's important because, like, if you don't, then you're just going to sit there and go, I don't want to go to his lesson, just not enjoy what he does.
Right. Write some ideas behind about the kind of things you're going to say, the kind of things you're going to do. Remember, you will have to talk about all these things on this checklist. Those of you with number 1 on them are going to be doing Havisham the poem. Those of you number 2, Miss Havisham in the extract. At 25-2, we'll start seeing some of these being performed at the front. Can't wait. So you've got the extract speaking. So you've got to think about, first thing you've got to think about is the things that she says, okay, the language that she uses.
What have you been picking out in yours particularly?
Because I don't get it.
Some of the papers was a bit confusing. It was like quite a lot of papers and everything to understand.
Right, so what you've done here, the skill you've used there is that you've actually used embedded quotation. So that's excellent. You've also put that in your own words. So you've done an inference here and you've used a quotation.
The poem was quite complicated because you don't know what she's on about. The extract was really long and got quite boring in the beginning, so it was quite hard.
I do want to see some presentations. Jesse, you had Havisham? Or do you have the poem, so Havisham, yeah?
What's wrong with you? We're gonna get married! I love you.
Okay, yeah, well done, Jesse. Wow.
I thought it was pretty interesting to be Miss Havisham because you sort of got an idea of what she was about, and it was much more challenging than usual.
Very quickly answer the peer assessment form for what you think about Jesse's performance. Time to see one more? No? Okay, in which case, I'd like you to very quickly go back to the thing that you did at the start of the lesson, which is your success criteria.
It was good because it was complicated, because otherwise if it was easy then we'd be just bored.
So how did David get on?
David, thank you very much indeed for letting me share that Year 8 lesson. I really enjoyed it, and so did the pupils. It was quite clear. There was lots of laughter and lots of fun. To give them an example, of course, was just brilliant, to sort of sit and do a role play yourself, because it shows I'm prepared to make a fool of myself and be laughed at, and they really enjoyed that. And I think they got quite a lot of English out of it, perhaps not quite as much as you'd have wanted if you know, when you were reflecting at the beginning and the end. How did you feel it went from achieving what you wanted?
Limited, I would say, in terms of what I wanted.
Right,
I think
yes,
they were a little bit blinded by the amount of instructions that I could have simplified that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, yes, a little bit simpler for Year 8 to cope with. From the bits I caught, your individual encouragement and your individual questions and your sort of trying to extend them all the time was super, you know, you really, but you had to do an awful lot of it because some of them, you've sensed, weren't quite clear what they were doing. So just to sort of go through the sort of specifics of the lesson in the sense of the English, I think the giving them 20 minutes to prepare for the presentation in itself was too long, especially in the light of the fact you were going to run out of time towards the end. Yeah. I thought having the two texts was making it more complicated than it needed to be. It might have been easier if we'd all been looking at the same one. And again, on the simplicity front, this was quite challenging, I think, for them to answer every question.
Sure.
Just a little more sort of simplicity would have actually meant they probably got more out of it because it would have just been a little bit more within their grasp.
Right.
With the first observation behind him, the inspector highlighted David's need to clarify his lesson objectives by having fewer, clearer instructions in order to reduce his input. Now it's time to bring on the experts. To boost David's progress, help comes from secondary English expert Sabrina Broadbent and voice and communications coach Ulrike Schulterbauchloh. They start by watching his lesson.
You were in her position.
No!
I wondered actually whether there was too much focus on performance. I don't think an awful lot of learning is happening anywhere when there's just performance.
I noticed a lot of hands in his pockets and so on. The vocal delivery is so emotional, more impact, more structured.
Answer the peer assessment form.
My emphasis is going to be assessment for learning, less assessment, more learning possibly, and how you tackle a great big book like Dickens. The start of that lesson, brilliantly calm and obviously positive. They have good experiences of lessons with you. And I just thought a way of getting all of you in the room focused on the learning and what it is you're going to learn, it would be to fill in the big blank space behind your head, which is empty, and put, you know, the two objectives, just have them written up there, so that, you know, there they are, like a kind of banner.
Yeah.
And everything then leads on from that. Doing Dickens is always daunting, isn't it? Great big book, time constraints, different abilities, different experiences of reading. One of the things that you might do quite early on is make them kind of literary detectives, really. So list 5 things that suggest this novel was written 150 years ago. And there's a really good teaching aid here, which is the book. Okay, it's right, 5 things which tell us it was written 150 years ago. They might come up with, you know, old language, archaic vocabulary. So what clues are there in the text that Dickens wrote his stories knowing they would often be read aloud? I mean, that's one thing, I think, to tackle the sense that, oh, this is too difficult. And that is that actually it's almost like a script. So that kind of, you know, throwing the gauntlet down at them and saying, right, bet you can't do that, there's the book, do some research. There's some props here, which you might use in all kinds of ways. One thing you could do is set up the elements of the plot. They act as kind of prompts during the reading. I think that it makes them curious, and we want to keep the curiosity going rather than foregrounding the difficulty, which they will be anxious about. So you've got here a girl kept captive, a fortune lost, a man driven mad.
I mean, you can almost sort of make it sound like a soap opera, couldn't you? Or think about it as being in terms of a creative writing task as well.
I mean, I think they would run for that. Then over here we've got characters.
Would you put these up even before they've met the characters in some case?
Don't you? They might be curious. This is someone called Arthur Havisham. So you prediction work. Who might Arthur Havisham be? So it's like, you're not going to get them to read every word of this novel, but it's a way of, again, making them researchers. You're all researching this old text. We're trying to get through it and remain curious and make discoveries.
Yeah, just how do you come across?
I suppose you could say that it's like I don't really care.
Yeah? One is casual, looking quite approachable. On the other hand, don't care. Just notice, how does this look?
Position of my body is quite sort of aggressive, isn't it, I suppose? Like I'm sort of bearing down on people.
Towering over people.
Over them.
Yeah.
Crazed, almost.
Yeah. The other kids sit actually on the same level with you.
Yeah.
Simply visibility.
Not all of them can see me. Quite removed from them, I suppose. I'm not really in their field of vision.
Yes.
What I would like you to do, please, folks, is to turn to your second sheet.
What I noticed watching the video is that you actually have a lot of talk. Yeah?
True.
So we will look how you can reduce this time and how can you make this more effective. Your voice, the resonance, the speed, your articulation is brilliant. But where you could definitely improve is the variety of it, because at the moment it is more grey, white, so it stays very much a little bit the same. What I like to encourage you is to use colors like green, yellow, and what I know you have tremendous skills to add more colors. And if you think of this Havisham, which colors do you associate here?
I suppose mainly the black and the red ones.
Those two, yeah.
Beloved, sweetheart, bastard! Not a day since then haven't I wished him dead.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yes. Got the ideas. Can you feel how much energy you have?
Yeah.
Keep this energy, and we're now moving and using this energy how to give you instruction with a little bit of this kind of oomph. Good. Off you go. Bright colours.
So, what I would like you now all to do is to actually go away and to spend 10 minutes.
Sure. More.
10 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Preparing your presentations on Miss Havisham.
Good. Did you notice you talk far less than when you take things in the more grey and white and you have to repeat yourself because they can't take it in?
I'll try and do more often.
With Sabrina, she had so many ideas that they're sort of coming out of my ears. I had almost abandoned the hope of being able to look at a whole novel in its entirety, thinking that it was too great. And she sort of made me reevaluate what my priorities are. And that's given me a lot of hope and excitement for trying to bring that into my lessons.
With his final observation just weeks away, David's back to the classroom to put all the advice into action and raise his game.
It feels proper to be using novels. It gives them more of a sense of something concrete and something real. Putting themselves in the position of literary detectives and finding out about the various characters and how they all interconnect both to each other and to the plot.
So we need to find a new character though. Yeah, look at for Wormick, I think.
Wormick. After some initial skepticism they had when they had this sort of dusty old book in their hands, I really feel that they've grown much more excited by it.
Where's he finding Pip? When he found him? They met somewhere, I don't know where.
Yeah, that's how.
Look, really different for other lessons, because finding the characters before we start the book is really good. Like, where is it? Try and find it, rushing through the pages, and you've got like 10 minutes to find it. It's like, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
I will ask you now to go back into your little groups and for you all to actually look at your last character.
I think Ulrika's body language and her tonal advice to me is something that I've tried to work on. It's still something which, to be honest, feels a bit unnatural. But I'm not getting odd looks back from the students, and it does seem that the instructions do, I think, get across clearer.
Estella is told to break Pip's heart because Pip falls in love with Estella.
What can we think is going to develop between her and Pip?
Would it be the untaunted love that was on the board? Like, he likes her, but she won't like him back?
This is the unrequited love. So I've had to move these. The unrequited love thing, which you weren't sure where it came from.
I don't really read books that much, but I want to read this book because it seemed interesting.
Why do you think it's Joe?
Because in the description it says he's got a hair on his face and he don't look smartly dressed or anything.
Wonderful, Hayley.
We never really finished books, but this one feels like we're going to finish it because it's quite good and everything. I'm enjoying it.
Get me in so much trouble.
David takes time to reflect with girlfriend Rachel on his progress so far.
They're getting it much more activity-based. That they can actually sort of take the bull by the horns and run with something, rather than me always having to bring it back to, you know, Mr. Polycat at the front. What you want as an English teacher is to see the development of passion for literature in those which might normally not be particularly mad keen. Check my queen.
We've invited Sabrina Broadbent to join David and help him team teach his next English lesson.
So, David, tell me a bit about how it's gone.
Well, the first thing was that as you recommended, I got the dusty books out of the dusty book cupboard, and they did some work on looking at a character in each group.
So what's the plan for today?
What I'm going to be doing is starting off by getting them to write the opening 2 paragraphs of chapter 9, using as many of these techniques as possible.
So it's going to be a bit of plot and a lot about the author's craft and the language and the linguistic features he uses. That's ambitious.
Yeah?
Yeah, but I think that's good.
I think Dickens probably wouldn't start with "I felt so aggressive." So perhaps you might start, Chloe, with a little bit of description about precisely where he is and then going into where he's feeling.
You're writing as Pip, you're in the first person. Are you going to have him about to knock on the door of the forge? Well, he wouldn't knock, would he, necessarily? It's his home. Are you going to have his hand pushing the door open? You've got a few things to decide. They're all set off brilliantly. I have a feeling, though, you know what's going to happen, that you're going to have to go around to every single one because they rely on you. One thing we could try is we could just say to them, right, do the first sentence, and then you say, OK, let's hear the sentence.
OK, when you finish your first sentence, that's when I want you to put your pens down. So, Ardit's going to kindly volunteer for us. Ardit.
The thud of my boots upon the cobbled floor kept reminding me of how thick they were, and the brushing of my hands to my sides reminded me of how coarse they were.
What do we think of that? I think that's fantastic. Why might you think that's good? Ashley?
He was referring back to what Stella said.
Yeah, that he had thick boots and that he had coarse hands.
Great. If people could help me,
I couldn't see properly for crying. Everything was all a shimmer. But...
Come on, Lee, you want to follow that butt?
But I can feel my feet scraping against the hard floor.
Oh, excellent.
actually, not floor, because he's on the road. What shall I use instead of floor?
Ground.
Ground, exactly.
She really sort of pinned them down and gave them sort of incremental baby step targets so they can actually see exactly what they've done in a sentence.
Morning, Refeth.
I suppose I'm confident because I think I've understood all the targets which both Claire, Sabrina and Ulrika have given to me. And I'm hopeful that I can build on the strengths that I already have in my relationship with the class, and their enthusiasm for the text, to bring out an outstanding lesson.
It's the day of David's final observation. Still time to act on Ulrika's advice.
So I'm also going to remove this barrier between myself and the children. It's a symbolic act, like the Berlin Wall coming down. No barriers to learning.
Claire Gillies is back, and it's crunch time. With all that expert advice and weeks of practice behind him,
Right, ladies and gents.
will David have made it? From good to outstanding?
What we're going to do in today's lesson, as you can see, is to continue to write a little bit more in the style of Dickens. And then in the second half of the lesson, we're going to think about ways in which we can actually read that aloud. Now, having read lots of your ones in my spare time, I realised that there were 3 devices in particular that we weren't using quite as much. The first device, spelling phonetically. I didn't know you were such a fat whale, is an example of phonetic spelling. Another one, very quickly. Fison?
All right, let me live it. One noise coming, avesta you have it.
Yeah, okay. Nice effort. Right, so the first thing I want you to do, you did so well with just doing little bits last lesson. I'm just going to ask you to write the next sentence, please, of your 3rd paragraph, in which I'd like you to use some phonetic examples of dialogue. Just 2 minutes on this, I'm going to hear some, please.
It was very clear because I understand what I had to do, so it was easier for me to write on it.
The next device that I thought people weren't quite so hot on was the idea of using irony. As clear as mud and as enjoyable as root canal surgery. Continue with your dialogue and get Joe or Pip or whoever's speaking to use some irony there. Why don't you go back to the voice of the narrator? So using Pip as the person telling this.
When we wrote our paragraph, he asked us to do some devices, but what I couldn't do was after I finished one, I couldn't put it straight onto another.
Dickens was famous for the brilliant readings he gave in Britain and America. To prepare for a reading, he would mark the pages with prompts to himself. Using these words here, think how you would actually perform what you have written. Writing on your work, words in the margins or words next to the words that you're going to be stressing. If, for example, you think you might use pathos at some point, so you would try and say that line extremely miserably. Think how you would be performing this text if you were yourself Charles Dickens. That's one reason why you might speed up. You're trying to increase excitement, aren't you? If you think about music in a film, the music gets quicker when it's getting to an exciting part, and that's what you're doing with your voice. So if you've got any bit here with a bit of tension or a bit of excitement, you might quick on at that point. Daryl.
I'm not quite sure what I'm doing now.
So what we're doing is you're going to be reading something at the moment.
The writing and trying to talk as if we are Charles Dickens was really hard, but at the same time, different and fun.
My small hand stroking my innocent legs as I begin to cry. The scene in front of me now become blurred. Mr. Pumblechook waddled behind me, snorting my name. Pip, boy, come here.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Jessica. Comments, please, about Jessica. What do you know about some of the techniques that Jessica used when she was reading out then?
When she said, come here, she went, come here, you.
She certainly, she made her voice sound aggressive, and also she, come here, I wouldn't say come here to you, I say come here.
Yeah.
So what What linguistic device was she also using?
She was speaking phonetically.
She was speaking phonetically as well, so she's done so many devices there. What I'd like you to do now is just to fill in this little task about how much you've learned and what you've learned.
Before we were doing kind of easy stuff, and he's made it a bit more challenging so we understand more. He's just made it harder, but then it's easy at the same time where he's explained it well.
Thank you very much, CFS. Cheerio.
Well, David, thank you very much. It was great to come back and see another lesson. It was lovely the way you'd structured those two very clear, different sort of halves. But if I honestly reflect on the sort of total volume of learning and where they got to, they did a great deal of work. I don't feel the second half came off as well as the first half. And I think it would have been much more helpful if we'd had some examples before we'd started to work on our own text of what we really meant by speaking cheerfully, speaking with pathos.
With hindsight, I would have done some modelling in between it.
Yeah, then it would have made a nice, because when you did, just briefly, we laughed, we relaxed, and a bit more of that and a bit more play on it, sort of in the middle. Would have...
I think at that point I was panicking about getting through the work, so I thought, right, no time for messing around now. Again,
quite a heavy lesson, and one or two of them I think really found it almost too difficult. But it was really interesting when I was talking to some of them how many said, "I'd much prefer it to be too hard than too easy." So if I reflect on the whole, there were, just like the time before, some really very good elements of the lesson, and the reason that it didn't make the outstanding category was the structure in the sense of breaking it up and the sort of perhaps overload of ideas that made that second half very difficult for them to absolutely clear, you know, what you wanted. But although this one lesson wasn't, I see no reason why in the future you won't be delivering some outstanding lessons. So thank you again for letting me share the lesson with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. But, you know, it's all about the journey, and the journey's been fantastic. You know, I would take on board so much of what's been said to me by various people. And although this lesson itself didn't go from good to outstanding, I think that I'm now equipped with all the tools that I need to deliver outstanding lessons in the future.